Sam. Welcome to Brickwall Pictures. In honor of Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery hitting Netflix and coming out in theaters earlier, I'm going to be doing a Rian Johnson tier list. I've done tier lists for a whole bunch of filmmakers, so look down in the description for a playlist full of all of those. I was waiting for Glass Onion to come out so that I could talk about Rian Johnson. You will notice in our pool of movies here that there is one big omission. I'm not going to be covering The Last Jedi, just because I haven't seen it and I don't want to. I was going to watch it, I was. When I do these tier lists, I do try to see, if not all of a director's filmography, the bulk of it and the most important ones. The Last Jedi definitely is a huge movie, and maybe it should be included in here, but I don't know, man. I planned on including it. I got as far as pulling up the movie a couple times and starting to watch it, and just I don't know. I cannot force myself to give a shit about Star Wars at this point. So I watched The Force Awakens. It's a fresh reset, whatever. I wasn't really interested in it even at that point, but I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I watched Force Awakens and I went. Then I watched Rogue One and I went. Ugh. Yeah, they're not my thing. If you're new to the channel, I tend to not like big spectacle movies. Big blockbusters don't do it for me. I'm definitely more of an art house movie fan. I mean, if you look around the channel, the most recent videos on here, purely by accident, have all been French art house cinema. So I'm not going to be talking about The Last Jedi, but I will say that it's definitely an important film in his career. It seemed like people were just getting used to Rian Johnson as, he's the guy he did that Looper movie. I like the Looper. He's doing the new Star Wars, and there was all this talk about he was going to do his own Star Wars trilogy, and then everybody hated his guts after The Last Jedi. I don't give a shit about Star Wars as a property in general, so I was completely outside of that whole discourse, but it was some pretty toxic discourse. But to make up for that omission, I've got a couple of movies in this tier list, these two here, that are real deep cuts in the Rian Johnson lore, real obscure early works that preceded his first feature film. So we got a couple short films to talk about. That'll make up for The Last Jedi. I don't know, that's what I'm saying anyway. Anyway, first up we have Knives Out. Knives Out was his movie after The Last Jedi. And based on the discourse around it and all the vitriol around it, if Knives Out... Let's just say Knives Out was facing an uphill battle. People were really not liking this guy. They were calling him a terrible director based on that. Kind of like how there are so many people who were calling Taika Waititi a terrible director based on whatever that new Thor movie was called, Love and Thunder, right? Everyone's calling him a terrible director based on that. All over social media, all over reviews, everyone's calling Taika Waititi a terrible filmmaker because of this Thor movie. Now, I haven't seen that Thor movie, and I don't give a shit about that Thor movie. I'm probably never going to watch that Thor movie. I never watched his first Thor movie either. But to call him a terrible filmmaker, that movie might be terrible. I have no clue. That doesn't erase all the good movies he did do, right? I feel like people who are saying that think that he's only done that Thor movie, and they hate that one movie. Like they didn't see What We Do in the Shadows, or The Hunt for the Wilder People, or Boy, which are all great movies, or the episodes that he directed of Flight of the Conchords, the TV show. He's obviously directed a lot of good stuff. Instead of mentioning Jojo Rabbit, the big Oscar favorite and all of it. Luckily, Knives Out won back a lot of people that Rian Johnson lost. Knives Out was great. It's a real crowd pleaser. It's a throwback to the murder mysteries of old, which we don't get too often anymore. I feel like people kind of take that to an extreme. A lot of people talk about Knives Out and Glass Onion as Rian Johnson's the only one doing murder mysteries, and it's no, really, there's other murder mysteries and thrillers and stuff that are coming out. It is specifically a throwback to the old school Agatha Christie style murder mysteries. There's a lot of British TV murder mysteries of this ilk as well. What Knives Out does is it takes that old school style, and very much the old school, there's the world's greatest detective, except it's not Sherlock Holmes or Hercule Poirot. It is Benoit Blanc, and it's Daniel Craig. And I really like Daniel Craig in these two Knives Out movies. But I would completely understand anyone who watches them and goes, he is terrible in this. I think that's reasonable, because he's taken a huge swing on that accent. He's doing a straight up foghorn leghorn impression. When the movie started, I don't think I saw any of the trailers. So the first words out of his mouth, and they do wait, like he's very mysterious in the background at first. The first time he speaks in that foghorn leghorn voice, I was like, whoa. Like I did a figurative double take, and it was very much, is he really going to commit to this accent the whole movie? And immediately I was like, this is either going to really get on my nerves or it's going to win me over and I'm going to start loving it. And luckily, it was the latter. I started really enjoying it. I think it's very funny. And I like him in this role. I really like Daniel Craig as an actor in general. It's not even the only time he's done the like really heavy Southern accent. He also did a really over-the-top Southern accent in the Steven Soderbergh movie Logan Lucky. It makes sense that he would want to leave the James Bond franchise because like it can be kind of one note. It doesn't allow him to, like, you can tell that he's really going far out of his way to pick a wide range of roles so that he doesn't just do like the James Bond thing over and over again. Anyway, so he's really good, but like that's just scratching the surface of this cast. Knives Out is like one of the best ensemble casts ever assembled in a way, which kind of was a thing with these old murder mysteries. Like if you look at, when I say Murder on the Orient Express, you're going to think of the new Kenneth Branagh Murder on the Orient Express, which should have a big ensemble cast with lots of big famous actors, but I'm specifically talking about the old school Sidney Lumet Murder on the Orient Express, and that was a big ensemble cast for its day. Some of those actors maybe aren't as, I don't know, big names as they once were, but a lot of them still are. Like, speaking of James Bond, you have Sean Connery in that movie. Michael Shannon, Don Johnson, Jamie Lee Curtis. Ana de Armas is excellent in this. I'd seen her in a bunch of movies because she's in a lot of movies. She's very in demand. This is the movie that like made me like, I would say, a fan of her. Actually, speaking of James Bond, again, she was good with Daniel Craig in No Time to Die. She really impressed in her like action sequence. It was a small role. It felt very much like they were setting her up for a sequel, which sometimes rubs me the wrong way. But I will say it was an effective setup if she does end up taking over the helm. And at the very least, it makes me more excited to see her in Ballerina, the John Wick spinoff, because she can clearly handle herself in an action sequence. Anyway, and then you also have Lakeith Stanfield, who I love. I love that man. He is always great. He's really good in Knives Out as well. I'm probably forgetting people too, because Chris Evans, of course, he's excellent in this. Oh, Christopher Plummer, of course, he's the murder victim that the whole film revolves around, but he gets a good amount of time to leave an impression before he dies, and there's also like flashbacks to him, so he still feels like a big part of the movie. It's so well plotted and it's very funny. It's just extremely entertaining. Now I will say the like murder mystery stuff, I didn't find it like mind-blowing or anything. There were no twists that caught me by surprise. I will say I felt like I was a step or two ahead of the movie the entire time, meaning a step or two ahead of where they wanted me to be. So like when the reveals happened, I was like, well, yeah, obviously. Now that's not me trying to like act smart or whatever. I'll say most like twisty thrillers, I'm not someone who goes into movies like trying to guess twists. I kind of like try not to guess twists or whatever so that I can be surprised by a movie because I enjoy being surprised by the movie. Knives Out, I feel like they tipped their hand a little too obviously in a lot of cases. Like the setups are a little too obvious that they're setups for stuff to come later on. Not always. There are some things that are set up that are well set up and well hidden. But like, I don't know, I kind of like, as soon as the like death happened, I was like, oh, I bet this is what happened. It just felt like the most natural thing to happen. And yeah, that was what ended up happening. I don't know. So it didn't like fool me and it didn't have like the twist reveal, but it was so entertaining that it didn't matter. I like Knives Out a lot. It's definitely no S tier. If you're new to the channel, I reserve S for like high art, you know, like S, I don't give up many S's. It's better than a C. It's in the B or A range. I think it is a strong B, but not an A. Okay, next up is The Brothers Bloom. The Brothers Bloom is I guess the easiest way to describe it is as a con man movie. And kind of, so The Brothers Bloom isn't as talked about, but I feel like The Brothers Bloom has a lot in common with it. I think you can draw a direct line between The Brothers Bloom and Knives Out. The Brothers Bloom isn't a murder mystery, but it has that same kind of really tight, intricate plotting. Also in the way that Knives Out was kind of a throwback to the old school murder mystery movies. The Brothers Bloom is a throwback to a kind of more niche genre, which was the con man movie. The Brothers Bloom is good. The two leads are Adrian Brody and Mark Ruffalo. They are the titular brothers, and they're both good. The rest of the cast is good as well. There are some side characters who leave a big impression. It is almost too twisty for its own good. With Brothers Bloom, it's almost like it reaches a tipping point. Like it almost reaches a point of it kind of reaches a point of diminishing returns with the number and the frequency of twists. It's like too many. You went a little too far. But at the same time, I kind of feel like there's a self-awareness to it because those con man movies do often get extremely convoluted. Like The Sting, like the final con in The Sting is so preposterous and impossible. And in Matchstick Men, it's like implausible and obvious. I don't love Matchstick Men, for the record. I do love The Sting, though. So The Brothers Bloom, I think it's kind of playing into how convoluted a lot of the big con men movies are. It being self-aware doesn't necessarily stop it from being a detriment. It's entertaining, but I don't think it's like super memorable. I don't know. It feels like it's missing a little X factor to make it sing. I do still think it's good, though. I think it's quite good. I'd give it a C. Okay, next up is Breaking Bad. You might be surprised that Breaking Bad is in here, because I'm sure you don't think of it as a Rian Johnson TV show, nor should you, because it's not a Rian Johnson TV show. He didn't create it or anything like that, so it's a Vince Gilligan series. But he did direct a couple episodes of the show. Normally, when I do a tier list, I wouldn't include like non-feature films from a filmmaker unless they like created the show or they directed like all the episodes or whatever. I am including him, even though he only did, I believe, 2 episodes. One, because his filmography is kind of small, and I wanted this to be a substantial look at his work. That's also why I'm including some short film work. But 2, because both episodes that he watched, they're both in the last season, and both of them were instances where the direction stood out in a notable way to me. And I went, I'm curious who directed this episode. Like, in a good way. And when I wanted to see who directed this episode, and both times, and the only 2 times I had that feeling in Breaking Bad, were both the 2 episodes that Rian Johnson directed. He definitely left an impression, which is hard to do in television, where a television show has many directors come through. And that's not to say that the direction of Breaking Bad isn't always stellar, because it is. Breaking Bad is phenomenal. It's an S-tier TV show, obviously. But the nature of TV is that oftentimes like the pilot or the showrunner or the creator or whoever sets the tone for the show, tone in many ways, the directorial tone, the directorial style. Most shows have many directors coming in. And because of that, and they want the show to feel cohesive, like a cohesive thing, it's usually a case where the directors need to like match the style of the show. Breaking Bad is a very stylistic show, and it affords its directors a little more freedom than some other shows do. But even still, most of the directors of Breaking Bad episodes do hew closely to the established style of the show. Rian Johnson was able to fit the style of the show, and then it doesn't feel like he's clashing with the show or like he's making some wild departure, while also standing out in a noteworthy way, to the point where the only 2 episodes that felt distinctly like there was an extra directorial flourish at play in a good way were both his episodes. So I think that says a lot about his voice and vision as a director. Okay, next up is Looper. Looper was his first like big budget movie that really broke through to audiences. Came after The Brothers Bloom, but The Brothers Bloom seemed to fly under the radar a little bit despite having really big names on the cast. It wasn't like a huge deal. Looper, on the other hand, was a pretty big deal. It was a big budget, big studio movie. And it's mostly successful. I think it's a pretty good movie. It does have some issues, though. It's one of the best Bruce Willis performances in recent years because it feels like he's actually trying. Even still, though, I do think he's not perfect. There are a couple issues. The way that they try to make Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis seem like the real person are a little more distracting than anything. Like the way that they put Bruce Willis in a hairpiece in the montage. Like the point is to make it more of like a smooth transition, but it ends up just pulling me out of the movie because it just looks ridiculous. Same thing with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's prosthetics. He's wearing like a prosthetic like mouthpiece and like face prosthetics to make him look a little more like Bruce Willis. And I think like the intention it's like a valiant intention, but I think it's maybe a little bit of a miscalculation because it's more distracting than anything. I don't know. I also feel like you're going to have Bruce Willis just look like Bruce Willis, but you're going to have Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's in most of the movie. You're going to put him in prosthetics the whole movie? I don't know. It just feels like the priorities are in the wrong area. It's kind of distracting. Those are minor issues. It doesn't make a humongous difference in my enjoyment of the movie. So that's a little more substantial. Is that the plot of this one? It's a time travel movie, and a lot of time travel movies suffer from this. But I'd say Looper, even more than some of the other ones, it's a case of the plot falls apart, not completely, but substantially, the more you think about it. There are definite plot holes that begin to emerge if you stop and think about it. They're the kind of things that, like, you can watch the movie and you might not think of them in the moment, but if afterwards, if you go, oh, well, does this make sense? Does that make sense? The plot holes start to emerge. Like, I kind of feel like the mechanisms that get this plot in motion don't make perfect sense. Like even the basic rules about, like, sending people back in time to murder them. It's a unique premise, but I don't find it all that plausible. I feel like that raises so many questions that the movie doesn't answer, that it doesn't have good answers for. So it hurts it a little bit. I think it's another C tier, but it's very enjoyable. I'll give it that. Okay, next up is Brick. Brick was Rian Johnson's first feature film. It was not Joseph Gordon-Levitt's first feature film, even though he was pretty young in this. It is an early movie for him, but Joseph Gordon-Levitt got started quite young, actually, in the acting game. I don't know if he was quite a child actor. Maybe he was, actually. I know he was definitely acting when he was like a teenager or like a tween, at the very least. Like, he's in one of the Halloween sequels, one of those like infinite Halloween sequels. He's one of the kids who gets killed in the opening scene of which one? H2O, I think it is, actually. I think he dies in H2O. Brick is a great directorial debut. I will say it does feel like a debut. Like, it's rough around the edges in a lot of ways. And it feels like kind of low budget, but I think it's a great example of, like, working within your means as a indie filmmaker with a not robust budget. It's a heavily stylized film. Rian Johnson definitely leaves an impression directorially. Like, you can see, like, some French New Wave influence, and obviously some influence from film noir, because Brick is a neo-noir that makes some really interesting, like, calculated decisions. The two big ones are, one, it's set in the modern day, but it keeps the old school noir dialogue, which, I mean, like, people are using, like, slang from the old days, like he's calling her, like, twist and stuff. So it keeps the old school slang, which might be enough to turn some people off of the movie outright because it's not believable in that way, the way that the characters talk. It's stylized to the point where it doesn't feel real. Like, it doesn't feel realistic or natural. It feels very stylized. I'm on board with that style. I like Brick a lot. I don't think a lot of people can get on board with it. Some people, though, it's going to rub the wrong way immediately with that stylized dialogue, and I think that's a calculated risk. The other risk, which is, again, it could rub someone the wrong way immediately and they might just bump off the film from the get-go, is that it's taking a dark film noir story. It's playing with a lot of those classic film noir tropes, but it's setting it in high school with high school age characters who are doing this old school dialogue. So it's very much... It's stylized to a degree that I don't blame anyone who can't get on board with this movie. And it has the potential to come off as... So it doesn't, but it has the potential to come off as feeling kind of cringy, if you know what I mean. Like, in that kind of amateurish way. Let's just say I've seen lots of low and no budget movies that try to do what Brick does, and they just come off as, like, kind of embarrassing, where they, like, set it into high school and they do the old school, lots of film references and stuff, and it just feels really cringy and, like, amateurish. Brick avoids all that. I think there's a lot of movies inspired by Brick that fall into all these pitfalls that Brick navigated. There is a little cheesiness in Brick, but I think most of it is tongue-in-cheek. Most of it's self-aware. The story is effective while also being funny. I'd say darkly funny. The performances are a mixed bag. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is really good. He's kind of the only one who pulls off the noir dialogue, though. Like I said, I can buy into it, but a lot of these actors are not good enough to pull it off, to varying degrees of success. Like, some of them are okay. Joseph Gordon-Levitt stands way, like, heads and shoulders above all of them. But Brick's pretty good. It has some memorable images, which is important. Visually, it doesn't always look like the noir that it aspires to be. but it gets close enough. I'd say it's like a strong C. Now the thing is, I would say it is technically, and I mean speaking on the technical merits of the film, that like, speaking of the technical merits of the film, it's definitely weaker than Brothers Bloom and Looper, but I enjoy it more. I think it's a fresher, more exciting, more entertaining, and more like passionate feeling film than either of these two. And those qualities count for a lot for me. I'm going to give it a B above these two, even though I will say, technically speaking, Brothers Bloom and Looper are both better movies. Okay, next up we're getting into these short films. These two are really obscure, and I guess most people haven't seen either of these. This first one, which looks like just a low-res screen grab, is because it is just a low-res screen grab, because this thing doesn't have a poster, because it's just a short film. It's called Ninja Co. Origami Master or Grandmaster, whatever. This was made in while Rian Johnson was a teenager. This is a short film, and honestly, it feels like I wouldn't even hesitate to call it like a short film. It feels like a home movie. It feels like Rian Johnson fucking around with some high school buddies. I think he was 17 when he made this, maybe 16. So he's obviously very young. The bar for quality is very low. I mean, it's on his IMDb. If it wasn't on his IMDb, I would probably not even talk about this, because it's definitely not a professional project. Like, it's literally him fucking around with some friends and a camera. It's not like a short film, and you can't really evaluate it as one. The fact that it's on IMDb is why I guess I'm okay talking about it. It's not good. There's some maybe questionable accents going on from white guys, I guess, attempting Japanese accents. The accents are so bad that I don't even 100% know if they're all trying to do the Japanese accent. The guy who's playing the ninja, I think it's a safe bet he's trying to do an accent and failing. I don't know. There's no reason to watch this thing. Even if you're like a hardcore Rian Johnson fan, this isn't like a thing worth watching. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. I'll put a clip of it in real quick.
Guard, I demand that you release me from these chains.
I cannot release you. It says here in my contract that I will be fired if I do.
Let me see this contract.
Very well. Here you go.
Ha-ha!
Wait a minute. I need that contract to collect my paycheck.
Yes, and you shall have it. Here you go.
I just washed this shirt.
I mean, it's definitely an F-tier quality, but like, he made it as a teenager, so you don't blame him. What I will say is that it's oftentimes nice, like if you are a young filmmaker, it is helpful to look to the filmmakers who you admire and you enjoy their work, and to look at their early stuff and see like where they came from, where they like were experimenting and whatnot. There's no flashes of what he would become later on in this. All that's there is like, okay, he was interested in filmmaking at a young age, and that's the extent of it. With this next one, you can see some flashes of the style of what he would eventually become. So I would say, if you are a fan of Rian Johnson, I would really only say this second one, by the way, which is called Evil Demon Golf Ball from Hell is the title of it. Still a no-budget thing, still very cheesy and rough around the edges. It was made several years after this Ninja Co. thing. This one's also on YouTube if you want to check it out. The only people that I would recommend Evil Demon Golf Ball from Hell to are people who are both huge Rian Johnson fans and like young filmmakers, people who are interested in filmmaking, who either are directors early on in their directing careers, or just like playing with short films or whatever, or who are interested in maybe directing movies, because it does have that quality of the like before and after, of like, this is how he got his start, and then he would then do Knives Out or whatever. There's a world of difference, and I do think it's important to have that point of reference for a young filmmaker, to be like, I can't make something as good as Knives Out right now, but maybe I can make something on the level of what this filmmaker who I really admire did when I was the same age or whatever. It has that kind of quality to it, and I do think it's important to have work out there in that vein. Everyone else, though, it's not worth watching. If you're just like a cinephile, don't go out of your way to watch this thing. It's not good. It's not terrible. It's not like Ninja Co. It's not like Like, I don't know if he's commented on Ninja Co, but I would guess he might be embarrassed by this being out there in circulation. Maybe not, I don't know, maybe he embraced it as like a teaching thing. Evil Demon Golf Ball from Hell, I would say, is not embarrassing. But beyond that, it's nothing too great. There's some ideas at play. The concept is there's this golf ball that is perpetually bouncing, and it's like tormenting this guy. It leads to one guy's death, and then it slowly drives another guy to his death, like drives him mad and whatever, because it never stops bouncing. It's like the sound of it, and it bounces all over the place. It's just a golf ball bouncing. It feels like Rian Johnson playing around with, we got a golf ball on some fishing line. It feels like we're playing around with fishing line for the first time. It's kind of the gimmick of the movie. There are some gags that just don't work. Like there's this, it's the kind of joke that like an early filmmaker will do and doesn't realize, just like doesn't translate as funny to a viewer. The thing, and in this instance, I'm specifically thinking of like points a soda can as if it's a gun. It's like, that doesn't work. That's not funny. Like it doesn't translate as a joke, but that's the kind of thing that like a lot of short films made by young filmmakers have jokes exactly like that. There's not enough like logic to it being funny, but it has like the vague appearance of being a joke. So it fits into the short film, young filmmaker type of humor, I don't know. It's not great. It's got some ideas to it, and you can see like the development. Like there's a world of difference between Ninja Co and this golf ball thing, and then another world of difference between this and Brick, which was his first feature film. And again, there was like several years between the Ninja one and the golf ball one, and then several more years between this and Brick, so you can kind of track his trajectory. The golf ball thing, I'll put an E. But anyway, now we're up to Glass Onion, his most recent movie. Glass Onion is the Knives Out sequel. He just said publicly that he doesn't like that Knives Out is in the title of the second one, which I actually already guessed. I kind of figured that it was the studio forcing him to call it Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, because it seems like the kind of movie that it would just be called Glass Onion. Because like Knives Out isn't a series title. If there was going to be a series title, it would be like a Benoit Blanc mystery, right? Is what I would think. Because Knives Out is the title of Knives Out. It's not like a series name in the way that like it's the James Bond series where we're following James Bond every time. Knives Out is specifically, that movie has the whole thing with like, the character has like his big chair of knives and all that. It's applicable to only that first story. Anyway, Benoit Blanc is the only returning character, and I really like, when I heard that they were doing a Knives Out sequel, I was like, how the hell is that gonna work? Like, that was such a contained story. And then I heard, it's gonna be an unrelated mystery that just Benoit Blanc is telling. And I was like, oh shit, I am on board for that. I will take more Benoit Blanc mysteries. I love that idea for like, basically an anthology series of unrelated, self-contained murder mysteries that Benoit Blanc, Daniel Craig's Foghorn Leghorn meets Sherlock Holmes will then solve. And I liked it a whole lot. I would say I almost liked Glass Onion as much. I think I like it a tiny bit less, but I don't think I like it enough less to go another tier down. I think I would still give it a B. But this one's closer to a C. Like Knives Out is closer to an A than a C. Glass Onion's closer to a C than an A. It feels less tightly plotted, and part of my issue is I didn't find the ending, I'm not going to spoil anything, don't worry, but I didn't find the ending satisfying. It took kind of like a brute force approach, which is meant to be really cathartic, but I would have found it more cathartic if there was a clever solution versus this like brute force approach. I want to be vague about it since it's new and I don't want to spoil anything. So I'm kind of dancing around it, but that's one of my main issues with it. There are some other things too, like I think the social commentary is a little too on the nose, a little bit. For some people think it's like way too on the nose and way too obvious. I do think it's obvious, but it didn't like bother me. So there's a lot of funny stuff in this still. I found the mystery less compelling. Again, I didn't really find much surprising or like twisty. I was surprised by without spoiling, I'll just say the Janelle Monáe reveal. I'll just say that. I was surprised by that because it's kind of ridiculous. I don't think there's any way to know to predict that because it's a little ridiculous. When it first happened, I was like, okay, that's a little cheesy. And I do kind of think it is still a little cheesy. It's kind of a, whatever. I feel like there was less effective misdirection in terms of like who the killer would be. Like the first one did like, I found it kind of obvious, but I still enjoyed the, like, red herrings and the plotting and stuff. In Glass Onions, the red herrings never felt convincing. They felt so obvious that, like, I couldn't even entertain them as plausible. The pacing felt a little off, but I was entertained the whole way through. I found it very funny. I found it very enjoyable all throughout. The cast is really great again. I don't think you could top the cast of the first one, and I don't think Glass Onion does, but it is a very good cast. I loved seeing Edward Norton again. He hasn't had many great roles lately. Like, I haven't enjoyed him this much in a movie since Birdman. I don't think I've seen him in a movie since Birdman. I know he did a couple. He did that Motherless Brooklyn movie that he also directed. I didn't see that one. Besides that, I don't think he's been in anything else where he had a big, like, noteworthy role since Birdman, which is like 8 years old at this point. But I like the rest of the cast, though. Everyone's good. Catherine Hahn is always fun to see. I actually like Batista a lot. I don't like John Cena or The Rock or these other, like, wrestlers who became actors. I don't like most of them. I don't find them effective. Batista I like. I find him charismatic. I think he knows how to act, which I hesitate to say about The Rock and John Cena, even though most people seem to love them. And I think it's funny, which again I would not say about The Rock or John Cena. So yeah, a little bit less than the first Knives Out, but I still liked it a whole lot. And I'm on board for more Benoit Blanc mysteries. If they stay this level of quality, and if Rian Johnson stays in the writer-director's chair, I'll stay interested. If they keep, Daniel Craig and they start doing Benoit Blanc mysteries with, like, other directors and other writers, then I don't know. That'll be a case-by-case basis for, like, who they replace Rian Johnson with, because, like, I don't think a detective movie with this character is a surefire hit. I think with Rian Johnson, it feels like a pretty safe bet that it'll be, like, in the same ballpark of quality. If they, if he leaves to do other stuff and they start replacing him, I don't know, I might lose interest in this series. I don't have any A's for him, and the only S is, not really a Rian Johnson S. It's the overall show as an S. So, B and C. But, quality director. He's still relatively early in his career. Like, Brick was only like 2005, so he's what? He's less than 2 decades into his career. He's got plenty of time to do more and more stuff. So yeah, I mean, he's definitely a director worth keeping his eye on. I don't think I'll ever watch The Last Jedi. I have no interest in The Last Jedi. I won't be watching that. But this is what I think of the rest of Rian Johnson's movies. You can let me know what you think of his movies in the comments. I don't care what you think of The Last Jedi, but feel free to tell me anyway. What did you think of Glass Onion versus Knives Out? I wouldn't be surprised if some people like it more. I will say, right when Glass Onion ended, I think I liked it exactly the same as the first Knives Out. It was only thinking about it a little bit after the fact that it started to lower a tiny bit in my estimation of it. Anyway, check out more of my tier list if you feel so inclined. There will be a playlist there in the description with all my tier lists. Check that out. I'll see you next time. So long.